There's so much that we can do, and there's so much that we would like to do for all of our customers, our different customer groups across the different areas. And we really need to be smart about thinking about, well, what should we do?
Welcome to the Digital Customer Comms podcast, where we discover how leading regulated companies engage, retain, and delight customers at scale. Today, we're looking at how to build digital experiences that work for everyone, from employers and employees to partners. With rising expectations and user needs, how do you create simple, smart tools that people actually use? Joining us is Lopez-Welsh, Chief Information and Digital Officer at Unum UK. With experience at Aegon Investec and the London Stock Exchange, Leo now leads digital transformation at Unum, helping employers support their people through intuitive, data-driven platforms. We'll explore how Unum designs for different user groups, where data makes the biggest difference, and how AI is shaping the future of workplace benefits. Hi, Leo.
Hi, Sam. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on today. You're serving a pretty diverse group of people, brokers, HR teams, individual employees. What's the biggest challenge in sort of catering to all of them in your digital experiences?
Well, that's a good question. The biggest challenge that we have is they often have distinct needs. So we are serving brokers and advisors, as you say, HR teams or employers and employees, and we need to recognize the differences between them and take on a nuanced approach. We do have a design philosophy that is grounded in empathy and flexibility. So we try and ensure that our platforms are able to adapt dynamically to the different roles while maintaining a cohesive user experience overall. So we do have a UX strategy, a user experience strategy. It is very much role-based, and we are tailoring the journeys for each of those user groups. But we do try to balance having dedicated tools for different users because, let's face it, they're quite different. We've got some corporates in there, we've got some companies, we've got some individual consumers. So we need to have the right tools for the right users, but at the same time, try and maintain a unified experience across all of those users as well. So that becomes one of our sort of defining principles. We try and maintain accessibility and usability as core principles across all of the platforms.
So you've got a core platform that then offers up particular tools to different types of people. Can we go through those just for anyone who doesn't know Unum well or hasn't dealt with you in the past? Can we go through some of those tools that you offer?
Yes, essentially, our strategy is based around providing a dedicated digital channel for each of our three customer types. So those are the types that you referred to earlier. So we have the brokers and advisors, our employers and their employees, and potentially family members as the three groups of customers that we work with. And each of our digital channels is built around specific user needs. So starting with our employees first, we have Help at Hand. That's our award-winning total health and wellbeing app. And essentially that puts essential support services all in one place, and that is available and is made available to employees and their eligible family members, so they can access personal and holistic support that is hopefully impactful and useful to them. So things like GP appointments, mental health consultations, and everyday lifestyle assistance. And that's an app, so it's widely accessible and portable and hopefully very convenient in terms of how they might use it day to day. And we provide, or try to provide, a simple user experience that's easy for them to navigate. Now, for employers, on the other hand, Help at Hand is there for the employees. For employers, what they benefit from is then simple administration and being able to provide employee communication support and also getting consolidated usage data, because that gives valuable insight to them in terms of understanding how their employees use the app and getting insights into how their health and wellbeing strategy might be working. And as part of that, it's also important to preserve that confidentiality. So they're not seeing individual details about individual employees, but getting an understanding of how that works across all of them. So that's the centerpiece, in a sense, from an employee perspective. We then have the employer portal, which is something that is very much aimed at the companies that we provide benefits to. That's actually relatively new. We launched this in 2024, and that was intended to simplify the claims process for HR and line managers. So it provides them with all the tools and information they need to submit and monitor claims, as well as making rehabilitation referrals. Additionally, it also offers the capability to track the status of all the cases that they might raise through a single centralized dashboard, and that gives them an on-demand view of claims and referrals. So as you can see, so far we've got one digital channel per customer type. And then finally, we have Unum Online. So essentially, that's a platform designed for our advisors and brokers that allows them to quote, buy, and renew group risk policies with Unum UK. And it does provide fast and convenient access to policy information, commission statements, and scheme histories for policies covering between 3 and 750 members. So those are the three platforms, essentially, or the three digital channels with an underlying platform. And they are integrated and designed to scale with our customers' needs. And we're continuing to expand and improve the capabilities of each of them.
So in terms of that decision, making a decision to have a channel per customer type, whilst, having a kind of, I imagine you have, when you say they're integrated, an underlying sort of data layer that they all sit on.
It's an interesting one because in an ideal world, we would have a single unified platform, but that is very much the technology sort of purist view. Wouldn't it be great to have a single unified platform that does everything for all of our customer types? In practice, we found that we had to take a more customer focused view, and it's very much having the right solution in the right place at the right time for each of our customer groups, depending on their needs. In other words, we found it to be more effective, at least initially, to build separate channels for each, while at the same time and in the background, building out a supporting what we describe as a scalable digital ecosystem, so that unifying platform over time that allows the experience to be unified and data to be shared and that integration to be happening where it makes sense to do so. So while in an ideal world, it'd be great to have that up front, in practice, it's about having the digital channels that make sense for the customer, then doing what we can behind the scenes to make sure they're unified while also preserving that flexibility. So fundamentally, it's dynamic role-based experiences within that scalable digital ecosystem, but we are choosing flexibility every time because that's what the customer needs.
And in terms of those sort of unique customer types, they're not like other roles where they don't really overlap much. So the idea of a kind of one to rule them all Unum app that caters to everyone doesn't really make sense, bar making it, like you say, easier for you.
Exactly that. So the capabilities behind the scenes might be common to all of them because they might all want things to be displayed in a certain way, and they might all benefit from certain kinds of report formatting, and there might be value in sharing data and making sure there's a common standard way we can do that, and making sure the data is unified across all the platforms so everyone is seeing the same data. And that's all good. But when it comes to the actual point of use and service delivery, well, brokers are brokers working in their offices or wherever they might be. Employers have got their own challenges managing their workforce and are very keen to understand what they're doing. And of course, the employees are out and about doing whatever, living their lives. And of course, that's why having an app is something that might be a particular sort of benefit or value to them.
So let's dive a little deeper into one of those customer types. Say employers, what are we surfacing to them digitally that they may not have gotten before? Say 20 years ago when employee benefits was a tick box checklist. It's much more of a comprehensive thing. Employers want to know what's being used, when, how often, etc. What kind of insights are they able to glean?
Yeah, that's a good question because we regard data as critical, and we do spend a lot of time thinking about how can we make the best use of data to help our customers, and in this case, our employers. So it's not just about surfacing the data or just giving them the stats in terms of what's happening. It's trying to turn it into actionable insights for employers so they can support their people, their employees better. So in other words, it's trying to answer the so what question. Here's a great view, here's some data, here's a nice graph or chart or insight, so what? And trying to figure out what that means in practice. So Help at Hand is a practical example of what we've tried to do there. So it's providing insight reporting to employers. So it's trying to give meaningful insights into the workforce health and well-being. And that is intended to allow employers to adapt their well-being strategy to best suit their needs of their workforce. So providing insight into key trends. So utilization, for example. So what kind of health issues are people logging or reporting? Which services are they making use of in the app? Because there are a number of different services available. The number of sessions they might be using. Some information about who might be using it. So for example, gender, age, that kind of demographic information. Times of appointment, because that can be quite helpful to understand, when is the demand, when are people available to make use of the services? And are we talking about the employee making use of the service, or are we talking about family members making use of the service? How popular is that ability to extend it to the family? So To ensure true confidentiality, we don't provide that individual detail. It's not about employers being able to track individual employees. It's more about having that view across the workforce about how popular is the app, what kinds of things do people use it for, and does it give into any insights into particular health challenges or concerns that workforce or their dependents tends to have.
So building out that type of experience comes with quite a few challenges in terms of each company has a different set of products, benefits that they can access and have different types of employees. What kind of level of personalization is going on for each company?
There's personalization at different levels. There's personalization in the sense of the actual proposition and the that we are selling to the companies in the first place in terms of what makes sense for them, which of the benefits make sense for their workforce and the nature of their workforce. And that's something that our brokers and advisors will help with in terms of understanding the needs of those particular employers and what it is they're looking for and the price points and the nature of the workforce. So at that level, the degree of personalization in terms of the product and the offering. When it comes to the actual sort of tooling and the actual sort of digital channels that we offer, we are very actively working on trying to embed that personalization at the point of use. So whether it's guiding an HR team through a complex claims process for one of their employees or helping an employee access care quickly, that is, to be fair, something that we still need to do more work on to sort of really try and personalize it further and create those work experiences. Now one area where I think we can say that we've made a reasonable amount of progress is in relation to help at hand specifically, because every user will have a different need. There's a wide range of different services that are available in the app, and each user's experience will be unique depending on the specific services they might go for. So as well as providing medical services such as GP appointments, users can gain a deeper understanding of their own well-being, and that's very much on them to decide if they want to do that, if they want to complete the short assessments that we have and get insight into their personal health. And once they've done that, if they're interested in following up and unlocking the one-to-one sort of sessions that are available as part of the app with a lifestyle coach to sort of help identify sort of areas of improvement. So depending on how far employees or their dependents want to go in terms of making use of those services, doing the questionnaires, looking at the insights, following up on that, getting the coaching and all the rest of it, you can result in a very personalized experience compared to just, say, using it to organize a GP appointment, and that's like a one and done thing because it was more convenient to do it via the app.
So moving that on to sort of timely, relevant digital communications in the app, you've got all this data that's being used by employees to gain insight, by employers, to gain insight, by employees to learn about their own health or track their own health. In terms of the app using it to reinforce certain behaviors or to take them on journeys where they get more education on particular things, how much are you doing that?
Certainly something that we have been working on, looking for areas where we can actually use the insights that we glean to essentially do nudges and encourage people who are using the apps, but also more generally, using the portals to go down that route. But that is something that is still relatively new from our perspective. So it's still an area that we're working on, but that's potentially an area, for example, where we might find that making use of AI or something might well give us some opportunities there. So it is certainly an exciting area for us to be looking at.
Now you've got the usage and you've got the platforms. It takes time to get the data that you need. It takes time to get the quantitative data you need from that, as well as the qualitative interviews and surveys of people actually using the products, focus groups, stuff like that, to actually understand, okay, how do we let people access certain things because they've done other things at particular times? How do we start to sort of solve these friction points within the journeys? Are you already doing that sort of research?
That's an area that we're actively investing in. So it's really, because that really fundamentally is all about the data and getting the insights from that data. So we've done a lot of great work in putting together our data architecture, making sure that data's being captured, working through and seeing what kind of insights that we can get from it, making sure that data is being treated in a responsible and sustainable way. At the end of the day, that data is important, and we need to make sure it's being looked after properly. And that is absolutely work that we are progressing with. One thing we're very conscious of, though, is that the data and the metrics matter, but we also need to make sure that we don't lose that real world feedback, because that we can do plenty with the data in terms of insights and nudges and all the rest of it, but we also want to make sure that we continue to listen closely to our customers through, for example, regular focus groups, back loops, because that we feel really enriches the data and provides context for why certain things might be happening, which the raw numbers might not tell us. I mean, that's something we also use internally as well. So, for example, when we are doing engagement surveys internally, getting feedback from our colleagues, we will measure engagement, we'll get quantitative data, we'll get percentage scores, and that's all very helpful. But it's really the comment, whether it's positive or negative comments about what we're doing, that enrich and provide context to the numbers. So in other words, the analytics is great, and we are investing in that, and that will allow us to do various things. And the analytics certainly help tell us what is happening, but it's the user stories that tell us why. And our goal is really to improve both of those areas meaningfully.
And there's always the struggle between resource, how long is it going to take to do a certain thing, to complete a certain project, versus impact. That struggle, that's very central to your role, I imagine. Do you have any thoughts on how much you should let back-end architecture influence the decisions that you make at the front end? We talked a little bit about being customer-centric before. There's obviously a limit to that because you have an architecture, you have an ecosystem that you have to work within.
Yeah, so that's a challenging area of technology, as I'm sure my colleagues in that space would agree. I mean, historically, we did absolutely need to take the back-end architecture into account because, like with any long-established organization, there's a mix of systems there using different technologies, different capabilities, different provenance, as it were. So we have found it to be very, very important to invest in modernizing the architecture used to drive the front end and provide those digital channels and those digital experiences, and make us less dependent, essentially, on what we might describe as heritage or even sort of legacy architecture. So our view there is that modern architecture is what empowers the modern experiences that we would be talking about, and our digital experiences are very much based ultimately about being able to put that modern architecture in place. Because of that, we found that we really have had to invest in building that scalable, integration ready sort of system and systems that allow us to respond quickly to user needs, and doing everything that we can to sort of really make that back end more agile, because that ultimately allows that front end innovation, and it also allows us to deliver new capabilities. For example, providing real-time updates, making data available to the customers directly, and of course that personalization. That's all stuff that really is only possible because of that active work we've had to do to sort of modernize as much as we can and reduce that dependency in what you might consider to be a traditional back-end architecture or systems of record.
Is enriching data a big challenge? Because I spoke to Deborah from Nest on the last episode, and we were talking a lot about the fact that because employers provide the data for pensions, a lot of the data is wrong, incomplete. They have to do a lot of nudging and enrichment to get, employees to fill in the data and to get it from elsewhere. Is that something that you have to contend with as well?
Absolutely. It's a key part of our industry, one of the key challenges of our industry. At the end of the day, we are all data driven, and that data is important, and making sure the data is accurate and valid and up to date and correct is critical fundamentally, and ultimately providing an excellent customer service. So it's about making sure that all the way through the chain between ourselves, our advisors and brokers, the employers, and ultimately the individual concerned, we do what we can to make sure that the data is correct and complete and up to date, and also a lot of work internally to making sure that we have that consistent unified view, a single version of the truth, as it were, of what that data looks like. Now, there's no single solution or magic bullet to this. There's just lots of work we have to do in lots of different areas so that collectively the quality of the data is such that we can do what we need to do. And if we find an issue, we can hopefully fix it with a minimum of fuss and essentially just move on.
AI will solve all our problems anyway, won't it? When it comes to data, that's what lots of people will say. That won't take 3 weeks. We've got AI now.
Yes, I mean, it's a good question because AI certainly is something we are actively looking at. We do genuinely feel it can help streamline and personalize our digital experiences. But AI ultimately does depend on data, lots of it. And the quality of that data goes a long way to informing the quality of the resulting AI in terms of the trends, the analysis, the feedback, the reporting it's able to make. So in order to be successful at AI, it is really important to be successful in managing data, because that is a foundational requirement to get the best out of AI.
And are you already looking at solutions around AI, or is this something that's on the cards for the future?
It's already something that we have been working on, and we are actively implementing and using AI solutions, because we've reached the conclusion that AI will help us deliver smarter, faster, more human-centered journeys and support, and it will allow us to provide a quicker, more consistent service. For us, what's really important is that we believe that AI will allow us to free up people for that important human connection, because a big part of our business and what we do really is about connecting with people, and we don't want to lose sight of that. So for us right now, what we're doing is using AI to help improve the customer experience. So for us, the main focus of AI to date is on empowering and augmenting our workforce. So mainly using cyborgs rather than androids, if you will, in terms of actually empowering our workforce and allowing them to be AI enabled. And the principle behind that is that fundamentally the reason why we are here is to help more people. And so by giving our staff the tools to be more effective in doing that, giving them AI tools to help them doing that, that will allow them to do that. And so that's been a big part of the strategy so far. So, for example, if we use AI to automate certain processes, that streamlines the customer experience. That's great. Things get done quicker. But also the people who traditionally might have been involved in running those processes, who are often very experienced people, have a lot of knowledge about the business and our customers, they are then freed up and can focus on more specific tasks or more complex tasks that we need to do with our customers. And as our ambition is to help more people, and we are growing and we have been doing that, then that's great, because those individuals can then focus on helping customers in other areas where they can add more value.
In regulated industries, the more that you touch customers and different types of customers with different platforms, different tools, you come across compliance a lot more. I imagine in your role, you have lots of meetings with compliance. In terms of making compliance an enabler and a partner rather than seeing it as a contender, do you have any thoughts on that balance?
Been working with compliance over a number of years now, different roles, different parts of the financial service industry, whether it's wealth management or pensions or here as well, employee sort of benefits. And my experience over those various roles over the years is that our compliance partners should really be approached as collaborators, not gatekeepers. Together, we're in a position where we can actually innovate, but do so in a way that maintains that integrity and is sustainable. And the reason for that is twofold. I mean, the first is that compliance teams, do provide valuable insights on the regulations and have that awareness of the ethical considerations. And so if they are working very closely with the digital teams, they can help create the solutions that aren't just groundbreaking or innovative, but also sustainable and responsible. So I've found that where you have a compliance team or a risk team or similar actually working actively with the feature team or the development team or whatever, that can really generate really sort of positive working. You've got two very different perspectives there that can really sort of drive out sort of interesting outcomes and coming up with a better solution. And where I've seen that done, and where we have done that, and where I've been involved in doing that, it's really made a difference. And it's because of that I've taken the view that actually we shouldn't view compliance as a barrier. If businesses collaborate earlier and more strategically with their compliance teams, get them actually involved in the work rather than just taking a view at the end as to whether the work is appropriate or not, that does actually provide a genuine competitive advantage, and it allows it to be an area for innovation. And ultimately, it does allow the digital initiatives that we're progressing to be sustainable and trustworthy and legally sound, as well as hopefully being an amazing experience for the end user.
Yeah, I've always found that compliance tend to be the ones that go, oh, actually, you need to think about these vulnerable customers. Oh, actually, especially with digital, because you're so far removed from the customer sometimes in these journeys, or when you're working on these journeys, that you forget. You build it for a certain type of person, and you forget that you're building it for a broad set of people.
Exactly that, because there is that diversity of users, that diversity of understanding of how digital services work. So it's really important to be thinking about that as early as possible in the process, so that we don't end up having to do corrections at the last minute, which might be quite painful for everybody involved.
So bringing it back to those users then, do you have any success stories? We talked about qualitative interviews and feedback earlier. Any success stories on the user experience improvements that you've delivered at Unum so far?
I think From my perspective, I've been here for just over a year now, and I think the story that really resonates with me, and the thing that I'm really proud that my team have been involved with and sort of helped deliver, has been the work that we did in the employer portal space. So essentially, just give you a bit of the background there, is that one of the things that we're very passionate about at Unum is really about user groups and working with our customers, in particular the employers that we serve. And in an ideal world, we have them there and we treat them as co-creators in our digital evolution, and get them involved in the roadmap development, the piloting and the testing. And this is exactly what happened in relation to the employer portal. So in 2023, just before I joined, we were getting the insight from our broker partners and customers where they were highlighting a strong demand for a digital solution in relation to claims processing and rehabilitation. And in direct response to that feedback, we developed and piloted the groundbreaking employer portal. And that is essentially a first when it comes to group protection. And that was to deal with the real pain point that those employers were feeling in terms of having an easy way in which they could actually sort of raise those claims or refer employees for rehabilitation. So that was a great example where it was in reaction to a market need. We got the feedback directly. It was a pain point. We built a solution in conjunction with some employers and getting their feedback as to how they felt it would work. And when that went live in 2024, so that was last year, that was a success. We've had swift adoption, and the employers using it at the moment, 82% of the claims from those employers who use that service over the last year have been via that portal, submitted and processed online, along with 57% of absence referrals. And that one I felt was really great because it was in response to a direct need that they mentioned. It dealt with a significant pain point, but as well as making their jobs easier, it also makes things easier for the end customer as well. So the actual employee who's affected, who needs to make the claim, needs that sort of rehabilitation sort of service and all the rest of it, it also makes life easier for them as well. And that's why I think it's been a great success. And it's something we're very keen to roll out to more as time goes on as well.
Such a good example of working so closely with your market to solve a core problem alongside them.
Well, one of the great things about it is, from that initial sort of thinking, realization there's a problem, there was very much an ambition to try and deliver something sooner rather than later, even if it wasn't perfect. So we were able to launch something reasonably quickly that we were then able to a limited group of employers and to get their feedback. And that iterative approach and working with the employers at every stage has really been helpful in terms of delivering it more quickly than might otherwise have been the case. It wasn't about spending a lot of time building the perfect solution, but addressing pain points fairly quickly, getting the feedback and moving on from there, and then really taking that solution from strength to strength. And that's something we are actively continuing to work on right now.
And then, of course, scaling it out comes with its own issues and challenges. What insights can you give on perhaps for other regulated firms trying to scale digital experiences effectively? What would you say worked well or works well, and what would you say not to do, perhaps?
Yeah, so we're talking about scaling digitally regulated industry. I think one thing that I've learned over the years is that it's better to start by reimagining the entire customer journey and not just digitizing the old one. Now, don't get me wrong, building a digital layer on top of an existing set of solutions or an existing way of doing things is a good way of getting started. It gives you experience, it gives you a way forward, it allows you to meet an immediate need. But what I've discovered is that essentially it only gets you so far. There comes a point where your ambition gets wider, and that's when you really start to hit the constraints of the existing architecture, the legacy sort of systems. And that's where going back to basics and reimagining it from first principles can really help to give you a better outcome. And that's essentially because those legacy systems can only take you so far. They don't necessarily have the capabilities or allow you to be ready if you're trying to do things at scale. You end up with all kinds of constraints in terms of the interoperability between systems, the integration, the quality of the data, and all the rest of it. So, but if you imagine the right way of doing it up front, then that gives you a roadmap or a blueprint as to where you want to be. And then it's really about being prepared to do the heavy lifting, essentially, to implement those new digital capabilities that allow you to deliver that journey while also reducing that dependency or getting away from those legacy systems. Where we've done that successfully, I could certainly say that we've been able to reap the benefits, but ultimately so have our customers. The challenge, I think, is to find a way to do it in manageable chunks, not trying to do a huge implementation all at once. If it can be done in phases, that really helps to deliver value quickly. More quickly rather. It helps to get the benefits to customers more quickly. And of course, given that we are operating in a regulated environment, it can really help to mitigate the risks involved as well. Fundamentally, it's about investing in new capabilities that provide flexibility, data transparency and experience design, because customers don't really care about the systems, let's be honest. They're just more interested in the outcomes when they're using the various sort of tools that they have at their disposal.
That's great advice. And I think a great place to almost wrap up. I'm going to throw one more question at you that I've started to ask people. What's the biggest challenge in your role at the moment? I think it's quite a nice thing to put out there as a last thought.
Yes, it's a good question. I think one of the challenges, there's so much that we can do, and there's so much that we would like to do for all of our customers, our different customer groups across the different areas. And we really need to be smart about thinking about, well, what should we do? Because we all know what we must do, what's required from a maintenance perspective, from a compliance perspective, and all the rest of it, and that's fine. And of course, we have the ongoing responsibility and challenges of keeping our business safe and meeting the challenges that the wider world might throw at us. But once you get beyond that and we're thinking about what our discretion is, it's really about figuring out what can we do that makes the biggest difference. It's that prioritization across the different digital channels, across the different customer types, and how does that move things forward? And being able to do that in an efficient way, figure out the things that we really need to aim at, the things that really allow us to take the strategy forward, and allowing us to deliver that without getting distracted is something that I would consider to be a main challenge. And of course, no conversation like this would be complete without talking about AI. There is, of course, that ongoing AI sort of expectation, that AI challenge. AI is there, it's real, it's transforming the world in all sorts of different ways. And of course, a big challenge for us is figuring out how you make best use of that in a way that helps our customers.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the talking point of the decade is, now we can do everything. What separates for the good from the bad and the weak from the strong will be the choices that you make, especially in business. Where do you focus with the everything that you can do rather than spreading your team too thin and trying everything and spending your entire time experimenting and going nowhere, because that's very easy to do, especially with AI.
Exactly that. So being better or being able to do a best job of making the right choices is one of the things that's a critical enabler for everything that we've just been discussing.
A great place to end. And thank you so much again for your time today. Where can we find Unum? Can we find you personally somewhere online?
Yes, certainly. And the best way to engage with me is through my LinkedIn profile. Otherwise, when it comes to Unum, we do have the website and the portals and all the rest of it.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today. Leo Lopez-Welsh. We'll speak to you soon.
Great. Thanks very much. Great to be here.